Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Watertown City Council meeting of Monday, January 7th, 2019. And the first item is a prayer, which I'm going to read seated so that you can hear me. But if you'd like to rise, and then we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance after that. Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this meeting. Help us to engage in meaningful discussion. Allow us to grow closer as a group and nurture the bonds of community. Fill us with your grace, O Lord God, as we make decisions that affect our community. And continue to remind us that all that we do here today, all that we accomplish, is for the pursuit of truth, for the greater glory of you, and for the service of humanity. We ask these things in your name. Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Okay. Albertson?
Here.
Bueller? Here. Danforth?
Here.
Lallam?
Here.
Mantee?
Here.
Roby?
Here.
Solom?
Here.
Thorson? Absent? Billhauer?
Here.
Y? Present. Thank you.
All right. The first item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda, and I am going to move item 7, which is approval of the street department asphalt patching and pricing policy. I'm going to move that to the consent agenda. It received the recommendation from the committee meeting just prior, and there's a lot of discussion at that time. And then I'm going to move item 2, which is the public comment, to after item 4. We have a couple of people who are participating via phone for item number 4. And so I'll just move the public comment to after that. And finally, I will remove item 10. We'll put that on, that's the consideration for the zoo change order. We'll put that on a later council meeting, probably the next council meeting, January 21st. So with those changes, is there, actually the consent is just the one thing moved into the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as modified?
Second.
Motion by Bueller, second by Lallam. Any discussion?
Mayor, I need to recuse myself from item 1G on the consent agenda as I'm on the 1st District Board of Directors.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. And then the next item will be approval of the agenda with the changes, the removal.
So moved.
We have a motion by Lallam and a second by Roby. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. A little time lapse with the phone call in. Okay, the next item is item number 4, consideration of resolution number 19-01, a resolution urging the legislature to not restrict the ability of municipal electric utilities to serve as valuable economic development resources and job creation tools. And I'd like a motion second for approval, and then we'll open this up for discussion.
So moved.
Moved by Vilhauer, second by Albertson. Okay, and the folks who have called in specifically for this, would you please identify yourselves?
Senator.
Okay, I think we have.
Let Lee can go first.
I don't know. I thought it was just you and I.
It's Lee Schoenbeck, Beth Mantee, and then Hugh Bartles. Is Hugh on the line?
Representative Hugh Bartles is here too.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I see Steve Lehner is here from Municipal Utilities, and he has a lot of really good background since he is the leader of our municipal electric utility to comment on this. So, Steve, would you mind giving us a brief overview of why this is a recommended action?
Sure. Thank you,
Hey,
Steve.
Mayor,
Yes.
we have to go to something else, so we just called in to, if you and I could just for 30 seconds tell you about this from our perspective.
Sure.
Otherwise, we got to go.
Okay.
I want you, and what Steve's going to tell you all the details, but I'm going to tell you this is a very serious political battle, and we are going to have our hands full, and it is going to take a real concerted effort by the community to get the message out that this is an important economic development tool, and the loss of it affects more than the city of Watertown. It affects all the communities around. It's a regional issue if you can't attract employment. But I wanted you to understand this is not shooting fish in a barrel, and the numbers would certainly be against us starting out.
This is Representative Bartles. I agree with Lee. I think this is an important issue. I think it's just not for the city of Watertown. It's for everywhere that has a municipal utility, plus all the surrounding areas. I think that's key. You know, we draw employees in from 50 miles away from Watertown as we expand businesses. And it's a real economic advantage to have a municipal utility and the rate structures that we offer. And to take that away as we expand in the new areas of the city would be really detrimental. I hope that you'll pass this resolution and work with the surrounding area to get support for this.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that input. Okay.
And sorry, we do have to leave. We're actually about 10 minutes away from our next function.
Okay. You're excused, but thank you for your input.
Okay, take care. See you guys.
All right.
Bye.
Now, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Lee Schoenbeck and Hugh Bartles.
They're just leaving. They're gone.
Okay, Steve Lehner from Watertown Municipal Utilities. I'm here to basically answer questions about the law, about service territory, about Watertown Utilities, about the rural electrics, as much as I know. And I'm going to start out by talking a little bit about the state law. So all electric utility operators have defined service territory by the state PUC. So our territory is basically the city limits. There are some areas that it's just outside of the city limits, and that's typical for municipal electric systems, okay? Investor-owned utilities have defined service territories by state statute as well, and we all have to go to the PUC and get our territories approved by them. So rural electrics, investor-owned utilities, and municipalities are what we're talking about. There are 35 municipalities in South Dakota. The 35 municipalities serve about 60,000 customers of the 880,000 population of South Dakota, so it's not a huge number that municipals serve, okay? So what the law states is that when a chunk of ground gets annexed into the city of any city, if that city serves electricity to their customers, they have the right to buy out service territory from whoever's territory they're annexing into. In our case, that's mostly Coddington Clark Electric, but there are some areas that Northwestern Energy serves, such as the Titan facility on the east side of town. That's Northwestern Energy property. So when we do that, we have to, by, again, state statute, we have to purchase out their facilities. We have to purchase to integrate their facilities if we break up integration for their other customers. And we have to pay 25% gross revenues on any kilowatt hours that customer consumes for 7 years in an 11-year time frame. Now that law has been challenged. It was challenged 10 years ago, so we switched. It was bare ground annexation at that time, so we all got together and switched the law. It was challenged 10 years before that, so this seems to come up about every 10 years. Now the rural electrics, they want a complete freeze. So they'll be introducing a bill in the legislature that freezes service territory. So even if we annex a chunk of property into the city limits, we won't have the opportunity to serve that customer. Now we have an agreement, so something might be a little different with Watertown, but that will probably be challenged in the courts afterwards. So if you're a Pier or if you're a Flandreau or any other Vermilion or any other municipal electric system, if you annex in property, you don't have the right to serve them. The rural electric automatically gets them. Now, there also is an item in state law that says if the customer is over 2 megawatts or 2,000 kilowatts, then they get choice. They can have the choice to not have the incumbent or whoever's electric service territory it is serve them. They can have a choice of the neighboring REC or investor-owned if they want to. An example of that would have been the turkey processing plant in Huron. It was a rural electric in Northwestern. They challenged that. Northwestern ended up getting that. But so a customer over 2 megawatts has a choice. Now, when they choose somebody that's not an incumbent utility provider, they have to go to a hearing to the PUC, and the PUC has to make sure that that other utility isn't subsidizing their rates and by giving incentives to the customer to serve them. So, our latest, the Terex, we're going to serve them, but they were in the city limits before. They would have had an option to go with Coddington Clark if they would have petitioned for that with the PUC. They chose us. And the reason they chose us is because our rates are 60% lower than Coddington Clark's. So this issue of a freeze for Watertown would mean if a customer comes to town, wants to annex property in, and wants to build a great big facility, or even a little facility, just under 2 megawatts, they would pay 60% more for their electric service than what they would if they were served by Watertown Municipal Utilities. That's going to drive them somewhere else. And if this is a law across the state, it's going to drive them to North Dakota or Minnesota or Nebraska. So I think that eventually the state will get involved with this, but it'll be a fight because there's a lot of legislators that are on rural electrics, and rural electrics have a lot of lobbying power, and they're working the system pretty hard. So I think that's it from the state law. Can I just open it up for questions if anybody has any?
Who has questions? Councilman Roby?
What's motivated? How did we get to this point?
We got to this point because we have an agreement with Coddington Clark that they brought to us in 1970. When I say us, Watertown Utilities. So this was before I got there, obviously. But they brought an agreement to us that stated we want to keep serving anybody that we currently serve, even if you annex property in. So you annex a chunk of ground in, and there's a spinning meter there that Coddington Clark is serving. They get to keep that customer, and we get any new customers that are there. For that, they're waiving the South Dakota law, the 25% gross in 7 years in an 11-year time frame, and we waive the right to charge 4% municipal tax on any RECs that are serving inside the city limits. And it's an agreement that's worked since 1970s. I have all of the minutes to all of our meetings and all the items that came up. And they wanted it perpetual at the beginning. In 1970 or 1990, they brought this to us, and they wanted this perpetual to be forever. And our board said, we don't want to tie future boards to a perpetual agreement. So they did a 3-year agreement. So then about every 3 years, this agreement came up again, came up as an item at our board meeting, and we approved 3-year agreements each time from 1990 to 2007. And again, this was originally brought to us by Coddington Clark. So finally, the PUC, every time we do an agreement like that, when you do a service territories agreement outside of the state law, you have to have the PUC sign off on it. So every time we would do this, we would send that action to the PUC, and they would approve it. And they've done that every single time. At the very end, they took it right about the time I was coming here, 2007. Both managers that were in place at time, Jeff Hyatt from the utilities and Gene Ward from Coddington Clark, said, let's do this for 15 years instead of just 3-year time frames. They took that to the PUC, and the PUC came back and said, why don't you do it perpetually? So they did it perpetually, and that's where we have our agreement. So that's kind of the timeline. The 60% is, we've got documentation on that because we take power from Coddington Clark in our well field. So our cost, we take their bills, apply our cost, and it's 60% more. So we know that to be a true number, and that would be a typical number of a small commercial under 2 megawatt that would end up coming to town.
Well, and I think it's a fairly well-known fact that we have low electric utility rates, and nobody can challenge that. We are the lowest around, and to restrict our ability to attract customers because of that, to come to our town because of our low utility rates, say, well, sorry, you're outside city limits, we can annex you in, but we can't serve you with our low electric utility rates. That's just counterproductive. That's not good for the customer. It's not good for our community, and it's not good for our state. So this is the action that we're anticipating is counterproductive to our orderly growth of our community.
That's correct, yeah.
And so we're passing this resolution, or we're proposing it just to make a statement of where we stand on this. Clearly, we do not want to change that. We do not want to be restricted.
That's correct.
Councilman Vilhauer.
Steve, I've got three questions. First of all, you said there's 35 municipalities that have a stake in this. But you said the numbers are like, what, 60,000 people? Why? I mean, who is not included in that 35? Why is it such a small?
There are only 35 municipal electric systems in South Dakota. The rest of them are either served by an investor-owned utility, such as Northwestern Energy.
Okay.
For instance, Yankton, Aberdeen, Mitchell, Huron, they're all served by Northwestern Energy.
Okay.
And then a lot of the small communities that are not served by municipalities are served by the rural electrics.
Okay.
This is really a critical, important fact about our community, though. Our municipal utilities are very strategic, and we've had those since early on. It's been why we've been able to offer those low utility rates, because we have a municipal utility. So
Our rates are an economic development tool.
yes, they are. Very, very.
Second question, maybe it's understood, but are the REAs able? Do they have the capacity to serve in the areas that they're looking at?
I can't answer that question, Glenn. I know when they were talking about serving Titan or Terex, I'm sorry, they had about a 4-mile line to construct to them with a substation. You know, I don't know what kind of capacity they have on their system.
Okay.
I wouldn't have that information available. They're not like the municipalities. The municipalities are open government. So if somebody requests a document from us, we hand it over through discovery.
So even aside from the rates, I mean, if there's a potential there of not even being able to serve, I mean, that would be extra whammy against any kind of development here. And
it would. Well, reliability is the issue, because the Terex facility would have been on a 4-mile radial, and if something happened to their distribution line that served the substation that serves the Terex facility, Terex would be out until they fix it. We have backup. We have redundancy and backup to serve that facility.
And would this be limited only to electrical service? I mean, I look at the water facilities around the state. I mean, would they also be involved in this legislation?
No, this is only electric. However, the water system, the rural water systems will look at it at the end of the day and say, hey, the electrics could do it. Let's take a shot at that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Albertson?
Steve, they said that there's a high-powered group out negotiating for one side. Does the municipal league have that same high-powered group out there in legislature right now?
We have a lot of people working at South Dakota Municipal Electric Association, the South Dakota Municipal Association. They're working at MRES, Heartland are working at, we've got lobbyists with MRES and Heartland. I don't know if our high power is as good as their high power. Our rural electrics are able to donate to capital campaigns. Municipalities are not. It's public funds, so we're prohibited from giving money to some kind of organization to lobby in the legislature. So they typically have a lot more power legislatively than municipalities do. And if you look at the sheer numbers, you know, the 80,000 people in South Dakota, 60,000 are served by municipalities. We're outnumbered. Well, there's a lot of legislators out there that are served by rural electric associations. So.
Read what? The whole resolution?
Mike, I know you have a question.
I do have a question.
All right.
I want to go to your numbers of the 800,000 versus the 65,000. And let's say I don't live in or near an area that is being serviced by a municipality. Why do I care? You see what I'm saying? It seems like that's a hard sell to those people that really don't have a stake in the game so much.
And that's part of the problem that Lee and Hewitt addressed to begin with. There's a lot of things against us right now, and our size and the issue is part of that. So only 60,000 customers versus 880 now. A lot of those are investor owned, and you know at the time the investor owns they're happy with the legislation as it is. So it's really the rurals that are pushing this, and actually it's Coddington Clark that is pushing this. Coddington Clark Electric, because they don't like our agreement. So they came to our board in 2007 and wanted us to just tear the agreement up, and our board decided not to because they weren't offering anything to get out of it or any solution to it. They just wanted us to tear it up. So it went dead for about a year, and then they proposed legislation.
So we're currently in the perpetual mode?
Yes.
Under agreement, and if they change the law, that would then kill that agreement?
That's what Coddington Clark thinks is going to happen. However, we're under a different opinion. So what'll happen is a large customer will come and want us to serve it. We'll serve it per our agreement, and then it'll end up in courts. So whether or not that customer will come, if it's tied up in the courts for how many years, or anybody else, is one thing. If we can get that through the courts, that our agreement still is in force and in place, then we would be okay. However, they're under a different opinion than we are on that.
I have a question, Mayor.
Councilman Bueller?
Steve, what would you suggest to this body? I mean, what can we do, or what can we do as a community to help preserve this agreement, to keep it in place?
Talk to your legislators. You know, I've sat down and went over with Lee and Nancy and Hugh, you know, in depth. You know, what are our rates? What are their rates? What does this mean? What are the law? And I've gone and done a lot of work with our legislators, but it's not our legislators that are the issue. It's legislators that basically in a lot of rural areas that are served by rural electrics. Rural electrics have a place, and that's to take power to rural America. And right now what they're trying to do is take over the edge of the municipalities and pick off some of that growth.
Hi, this is Beth. Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
Is it possible to have a list made, I'm sure there is one, of exactly the legislators that are in these rural districts that, you know, I right now couldn't go through a list and tell you exactly who was and who wasn't, but it would be really helpful for some of us to be able to know who are the legislators that are in these rural areas that are pushing this, because I think that's, you know, a good tool, especially I would be talking to them, you know, and talking about hurting development overall in a state, even though they're seeing it from a different perspective. Perhaps sharing our perspective with multiple people would be beneficial. But I would wonder if there was a list of those particular legislators that are served by rural.
You know, there is, and we can probably get that through our MRS legislative group. However, I think it's the municipalities, legislators that are in that area that you need to get to. The rural electrics will tell you they're helping economic development. Not every rural electric is 60% over the rate of the municipality. For instance, Brookings is probably 10 to 15%. So we're unique because our rates are so low in Watertown. Not every municipality is that way. So the rural electrics are going to push that they're helping economic development. And even in Watertown, Coddington Clark gave a grant to Trav's Outfitters to build that facility, even though they don't serve them. So they are helping economically in our community, and they're part of our community. They just want the growth. So I can get that, Beth, and we can do our best to identify which senators and which congressmen and women are from investor-owned, from a rural electric, or from a municipality, and that'll overlap. You know, there are some that will overlap. So
Yeah, that'd be good.
That'd be just great if you could do that. Thanks.
Councilman Roby?
Yeah, I just want to weigh in. I'm involved in some economic development type activities, have been since I've gotten back to the community. And I can just tell you, and I can attest to the fact how important this is to people that we try to recruit to the community. And I've been in conversations where the utility rates come up, and we get a real edge when that comes. There's a lot of things, you know, weather's not our friend here in many cases, but boy, utilities is our friend. It is one of our silver bullets, if you will. If that legislation goes through, make no mistake, that will hurt Watertown, it will hurt our region, and it'll hurt the potential of our community to grow. This is a very important issue.
It's not efficient growth. And I think it might be beneficial for me just to read the resolution for those who don't have it in front of them. It's not long, so I'll go ahead and read that. Whereas the municipal electric utilities of South Dakota represent the values of the communities they serve, providing that the operational and rate-setting decisions are made locally by members of the community at open and public meetings, and revenues are reinvested locally to foster economic development and innovation. Whereas the municipal electric utilities of South Dakota have consistently been one of the most important economic development resources for job creation in our region by allowing the cities involved to attract businesses with lower costs of power. And whereas the rural electric associations have consistently charged more for power, and their proposed legislation would remove this valuable economic development tool from many cities in our state, and whereas good jobs are created for families in many regions of South Dakota by this valuable economic development tool, now therefore be it resolved that the City of Watertown urges the legislature to not take away this valuable job creation tool by restricting cities' ability to annex and offer lower cost power in attracting businesses to South Dakota and our region. So that's what we're acting upon tonight. Are there any more questions or comments? Councilman Danforth?
Steve, are the rural electrics, are they for-profit organizations? Are they non-profits? What are they? If they're
non-for-profit organizations similar to us. They're public power entities. They're not covered under the government open meeting laws.
And their financials aren't?
No.
Any other questions or comments? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries.
Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thanks, Steve. All right. Now I will open the public comment period. This is a time that we set aside for anyone who would like to make a public comment to step forward and do so. See none, we'll move on. The next item on the agenda is authorization for the mayor to sign a memorandum of understanding with the Watertown School District for the school resource officer. So I'll look for a motion, second for approval, and then we'll discuss it. So moved by Lallam. Second by Roby. Assistant Chief Toomey is here to tell us about this. So Tim, take it away.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for having me. This is just an agreement that we have with... Do I have to start over? This is an agreement we have with the school for the school resource officer position. The last time we had a signed agreement was in 2006, and since that time some grants have ran out and those types of things. So there's just a few minor changes on this MOU compared to what it's been in the past. And do you guys have copies in front of you? I'll just go over them real quick, and it's mainly just wording, but in number 4 of the goals and objective is the first change, and the school just wanted to make sure that we had other duties as assigned in there so that they have a little more flexibility on what the SROs do in their school. The superintendent, Dr. Danielson, wanted to make sure that the SROs will report directly to him or the school principals in number 5. In number 10, the SROs will attend NASRO training. We added that the school and the city will share that cost. They've been really good with providing that to us. And then in number 11, that's where all this stuff about the grant was in there, and we took that out, and it's still a 50-50 agreement. So I'd be happy to answer any questions about the program or about the MOU.
Okay, Councilman Vilhauer?
Tim, is this the city's employee?
Yes, it's a 50-50. There was
Okay, well, I guess that was my understanding, but as you look at 11, maybe I'm splitting hairs here. I mean, isn't it a matter of the schools actually reimbursing the city the 50% portion?
Yes.
I mean, does that need to be clarified, or is it understood that that's the case?
I think it's understood. That's the
Okay.
way it's always been, is
Okay.
we pay the employee and the school reimburses.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments?
Tim,
Councilman
is this a
Danforth?
one-year agreement? Is this a multi-year agreement?
It's a continual until
Till it
something changes, yeah.
It's a memorandum of understanding. Not really, well, it's kind of an agreement.
I can tell you the school is tremendous to work with, and they're very flexible, and we have a great partnership.
Anyone else have questions? All right, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Sorry, Beth. I'll give you more time next time.
It's okay. I know you can hear me eventually.
Item number 6 is ordinance number 18-29, amending section 1.0502 of the revised ordinances of the City of Watertown regarding membership requirements of the airport board. And so I'll look for a motion and second for approval, and then we'll talk about it. Moved by Lyle. Second by Manti. Okay, and this is, the airport board requirements right now are you have to live in the city limits. And we actually, I discovered this when I went to make an appointment to the airport board, and I had a person that definitely is part of our community, but lives outside the city limits, but very nearby. And realized I couldn't do it, but also realized that we already have an airport board member before that that was outside the city limits as well. So we're violating our regulations. So we talked about what's the purpose of restricting our airport board to city limits, folks. And really that's counterproductive. The airport doesn't just serve the city limits. The airport serves our whole region. That's why we call it the regional airport. So this makes it more regional. The change that we're presenting is, I think it's 35 miles, which is consistent with the city city employee restriction. Oh, and it's we still require that 3 members would be residents of the city within the city limits, and then so that would leave 2 that could be outside the city limits as long as they're within 35 miles. So are there any questions or comments about this? None. All right. I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Okay, now our 2 airport board members are completely legit. Item number 7 is approval of the street oh, I moved that, sorry. That item 7 was approved with the consent agenda. Item number 8 is authorization to set the date for the 2019 Municipal and Watertown School District election as June 18th, 2019. So look for a motion and second for approval. Moved by Solom, second by Bueller. Kristen, you want to explain this, please?
Thank you, Mayor. This is just our standard to set our election date for the 2019 municipal election, and it will be on June 18th, 2019.
Any questions or comments? Guess we knew this was coming. All right, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify
Aye.
by saying nay. Motion carries. All right. Item number 9 is consideration of the engineering department staffing request change for the 2019 budget. And this was put on here by the city engineer Heath in reviewing our organization and what the proposed staffing request was, which was to fill a tech position. And he's requesting that we close that but open up the engineer 1 position, which was vacated recently by a retiring engineer. And unfortunately, Heath had a funeral to go to, so he couldn't be here tonight. So Assistant City Engineer Colin Paulson is going to explain this.
Thank you, Mayor. Ray, can you put my screen on, please? So I think the mayor did a great job kind of leading into this. I was here when we kind of went through Shane leaving and then Roger retiring, and we kind of made a decision at that time to go with 2 grade 5s and 1 grade 4 instead of a grade 6. Trying to get bodies into our department. We were short-staffed at that time, that we needed the help we could receive at that time. But things changed. We didn't get the help that we wanted at that time. And now that Heath has started, we've really taken a long look at this multiple times. Heath and I have sat down on numerous occasions, reviewed where we're lacking kind of in the department at this time, and what's going to benefit us the most. And that's why he came up with, he thinks that a grade 6 is going to be the best. There's multiple reasons for that. One is definitely better customer support and interaction. Right now it gets bottlenecked on my desk before I get anything to Heath. We're both extremely busy. Adding another grade 6, they'll be able to help out with some of the review, some of the interaction with contractors and developers, other engineers, and help review plans. I think that's a big one right now. We get a lot of plans dumped out on us. It seems like at the same time, a lot of the time, and I guess that's kind of where we thought we would come forward with this, or why we thought we'd come forward with this. As you see on my screen, this chart was to show kind of the years of experience, and I'm going to flip over here and I'm going to show where this is derived from. If you see here, starting in the year 2001, we had an assistant city engineer, a city engineer, a planning and zoning official, and a public works director that all had experience in the civil engineering field and were licensed civil engineers. And we had 99 total years of experience, and we had 4 engineers on staff at that time. I'm not going to go through each year, but as you see, we crept up. We got to 118 with 5 members in 2009. And now in current day, we're down to 2 members currently, and me being new, we only have 22 years of experience total in our department, and that's where we're lacking. We do get a lot of feedback asking for quicker turnarounds. We just can't offer that at this time. Like I said, it gets bottlenecked. We have to thoroughly review these plans that are coming in. It's not an overnight process, and it's hard to get that out to people, that it doesn't happen overnight. But with more bodies looking at it, I think the less we'll miss on the first go around if we do miss anything, and we'll be able to turn it around quicker because we'll have multiple eyes on it.
I would like to add that the grades that we're talking about, the difference between a grade 6 and a grade 4 is really, it's a completely different job description. We're talking about engineer 1 being a grade 6. That's a person with an engineering degree qualified to review engineered calculations and designs. A technician is a 2-year degree and doesn't generally review engineered designs or do engineered designs. An engineer can do the engineering design, and a technician could too do a lot of the basic work, but it have to be reviewed again by a civil engineer. So I support Heath's request to revise what the budget was. The budget request for 2019 was to add a technician, not an engineer. And I agree. I think looking at the workload and the bottlenecks within that department, another engineer qualified to review designs and actually to perform designs would be beneficial to the public.
Absolutely. She hit that right on the head, everything she just said. I think the technical aspect is what we're missing right now, and we need another body for that.
Yes.
I'll just
Roby.
comment in favor of this. It's two things. It's customer service and throughput. They're tied intricately together. And I'm hearing some of the same issues you've brought up. Things aren't moving fast enough. We can't get to people. I think for the incremental cost, that's a good investment.
And I don't think you mentioned that. It's an extra 16,000. Is that correct? So, Councilman Billhauer?
I don't know the engineering world, but I can see a lot of similarities there to the accounting world, and that this would be similar, in my thinking at least, to when we would hire a 2-year accountant with an associate degree versus someone that's got a major, a bachelor's, if not a master's in accounting, and possibly even CPA designation. World of difference there, and we always, if that opportunity came along, we would snatch up the bachelor, the master person. Not to say that the 2-year person didn't fill a role, but we always went that route, and I just see a lot of similarities there that I think we'd be selling ourselves short by not going for the expertise versus trying to save some dollars.
Right.
I think that $16,000 difference would be made up pretty quickly with the staffing efficiencies that you would gain with that employee.
Agree. Are there other questions or comments? I didn't get a motion, so I'll ask for a motion. Moved by Danforth, second by Lallam. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thank you. All right, item 10 was removed, and so we're on to item 11, which is old business. And I thought I would give an update on what's going on with the airline. There's been a lot of talk about that. We had a series of events which have occurred from signing our contract with Aerodynamics Inc., or ADI, last summer. They were almost immediately purchased by California Pacific Airline, and that didn't change the agreement. There's still the agreement. ADI was a small airline, 4 planes. They ran our essential air service from Watertown and Pier to the hub of Denver, and we get a federal subsidy for that service. And they did an outstanding job with that. And they also did a charter business on the side. So when California Pacific purchased ADI, they closed the charter operation and opened up commercial airline service in California and split the planes up, half between California and half here in Watertown and Pier. And so that was late in the summer, and things were all right until the spare plane that we had serving our airports here in the Midwest One of them was damaged with an accident at Pier that didn't hurt any people, but it damaged the wing of the airline at the end of October. And so that took our backup plane out of service. And after that, every time we had a problem with our plane, it had to be grounded until it was fixed. Whereas in the past, when we had a spare plane, the spare plane would fly in and pick up the passengers and take them on their way. So we limped along, and it reached a critical mass. Around Thanksgiving, people were stranded because both of our planes serving our part of the country were out of service for short periods of time, but enough time to strand people, and it was horrible. Our excellent service quickly just dropped down to nothing, and the city of Pier and the city of Watertown were working together. Representatives from the airport boards of both communities, representatives of the council and the Department of Transportation, and both mayors, the city attorneys, and our airport consultant, which both the city of Pier and Watertown utilize, were discussing this right from the get-go when the problem started and trying to figure out what to do about it. And it culminated in an action where in December, just before Christmas, where it looked like we were going to just lose service altogether over the holiday, which was a horrible thought. And the cities of Pier and Watertown do not have a contract with the airline. The Federal Department of Transportation has a contract with the airline, and they have the control over what happens with that. So our cities bound together, and we wrote this letter that we sent on December 21st to the Department of Transportation, urging them to work with the airline to quickly resolve the problems that they were having, or cancel the contract and find another airline that could meet our needs and meet the contract conditions. So the Department of Transportation did step in, and there have been changes at the airline. The airline closed their California operations, and they're focusing only on our essential air route. So we still have several planes in disrepair, but we've got all the planes now. They're all focused here, at least for now. And there's some financial concerns that we had also with the airline, with the new management. It's something that the new owner had dreamed of having an airline, but maybe didn't have experience and made some poor decisions. But they have new investors now, and I've spoken with them, and they are committed to bringing us back into the same high level of service that we were receiving from the airline before all this happened. So it's looking good right now. You can't count weather. That's not the airline's fault. But so far we've been operating consistently since we wrote that letter, and there was a heart-to-heart conversation between the parties involved. So I can't make any promises. And as I said before, the city of Watertown, the city of Pier, does not have the contract for airline service with California Pacific. That agreement is between the Federal Department of Transportation, and all we can do is urge them to make the best decision for us. We realize that when the public loses faith, they may stop flying out of Watertown, and that's bad for everybody. That's bad for our community. We don't want that to happen. So the service appears to be reliable, and we hope it continues that way. If it doesn't, we hope there will be a swift resolution, and I believe there will be. So does anybody have any questions about that? All right. Is there any other?
Mayor?
Oh, yes.
Roke, did you want to say something to the effect that there was the headline in the PO the other day
yes,
that we're not
Thank you for
unhappy with
reminding
our accountant service?
Yes.
Okay.
I intended to do that. The headline in the newspaper said that it expressed that the city was unhappy with California Pacific Airline, and it was abbreviated to CPA service, that the city was unhappy with our CPA service. we have a certified public accountant service as well, which is also abbreviated CPA, and we're not unhappy with that service at all. We're very happy with our CPA service. So thank you for reminding me. That was why I put this on here. So we're very happy with our accounting. We're just not happy with the airline, but we're seeing some improvements. So it's all good, at least for now. Thank you, Matt. Is there any other old business? Any new business? Yes, Councilman Vilhauer.
Maybe you're going to mention, I'm not sure if this is old business or new business, just a reminder that Wednesday at noon, the Home Rule Charter Review Committee has their first meeting, and that is open to the public, and it's right here in the council chambers. Will they be televised?
I believe they're going to be televised, and
Okay.
That group will make its own schedule once it convenes.
And I also want to extend a thank you and kudos to City Attorney Matt Roby. There were a series of some informational meetings conducted for the committee last week. Heard some favorable feedback from at least one of the attendees of that presentation. Job well done, so appreciate the extra effort on that, Matt.
Yeah, Matt worked hard on that, so that's good. And that information that he presented is available if anybody wants to see it. And we'll be, it's our intention to record the meetings and have them available on the website for people to view afterwards if they're unable to make it. 21 people it's challenging to get that many people together at the same time, so having the meetings recorded is going to be helpful.
Mayor, can I make a comment on that?
Sure.
I've had a lot of people that have stopped me on a number of issues lately, other than snow. But there really is a misconception as to what this Home Rule Charter Review is. And one gentleman said, don't you guys have something better to do than do that? It's part of our Home Rule Charter. It's not this council or this mayor making that decision. This is by Home Rule Charter and our ordinances that are requiring this review and this selection or this committee to go through this. So it is important that people understand this is not this body's choice to have this done. This choice was made 10 years ago when the people of this community voted to be under Home Rule Charter. So this is just part of that process, and we need to let this committee do their jobs and see what they come up with. So.
Right. Prescribed periodic review is now.
Yeah, I would just add to that was specifically voted on by the public in 2008 to institute the periodic review to the charter. Prior to that, there wasn't a formalized periodic review, so that was voted on by the public and approved. So that's part of this process.
Great, thank you. Councilman Vilhar?
Just a comment too. I think those that have agreed to serve in this, I think they understand the importance of what they are doing. I don't know how the rest of you, what their experience was, but when I asked my two representatives, you know, it's like pulling teeth quite often to get people to serve on something. Well, I barely had the question out of my mouth in each case with my two representatives, and they said yes. I mean, they understood how important this was to the future of the community, and they were very, very willing and eager to be involved in this process.
Yeah. Any other comments? Any other new business? Any liaison reports?
Mayor, I'd like to have Dee Dee Whitman come up tonight just to the speaker just for a couple of minutes here just to explain something regarding the library.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, I'd be happy to talk about our library once again receiving the exemplary accreditation through the state, South Dakota State Library. And I'd like to say thank you to our library board members, our library staff. We had some help from other city departments in all of the steps that go into it. There are 80 standards to be met. And we met 79 out of the 80 to become to get that exemplary accreditation. So if anybody is in Pierre on February 12th at 3:30, there will be a ceremony to present our library as well as others around the state that have earned that accreditation this year. And it will run for the next 3 years, and then we'll apply for the process again. So,
Excellent. Congratulations.
thank you. We're really excited.
Good job. Our library rocks. That is
Our
a
library
fact. Thank you, Dee Dee.
Thank you.
Any other liaison reports? All right, we have no reason to go into executive session, so I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Lallam, second by Way. All those in favor, why? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries.